Welcome to Ashton Park School in Bristol. The big questions. I'm Nicky Campbell. God said unto them, be fruitful and multiply and replenish the earth and subdue it and have dominion over the fish of the sea and over the fowl of the air and over every living thing that moveth upon the earth. Well, whether God actually said these words to people called Adam and Eve may be a matter of religious argument. But there's no denying that humanity has treated the planet as its own fiefdom, often to the detriment of other species and the environment. So this morning we're asking just one very big question. Has man's dominion been good for the planet? To debate this, we've assembled some very distinguished environmentalists and activists, theologians and skeptics, writers and academics from both sides of this debate. They'll be encouraged by our very lively Bristol audience. And you can join in too via Twitter. You can log on to bbc.co.uk/thebigquestions, where you'll find links to continue the discussion online. Well, last week, the Prince of Wales warned that economic prosperity was decimating the world's wildlife. And the State of Nature report revealed that 60% of Britain's animal and plant species have declined over the last 50 years. Across the planet, level of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere has reached 400 parts per million for the first time in human history. And the most comprehensive review of research into global warming found that 97% of scientists agree that recent warming has been caused by man. Has man's dominion been good for the planet? Well, Tony Juniper, it's pretty bad, isn't it?
It is pretty bad, and those statistics speak for themselves. And at the global level, not only have we seen a decline in species in this country, we're undergoing a mass extinction of animals and plants at the global level on a scale not seen since the time the dinosaurs went extinct. That's an evolutionary memory that's accumulated over hundreds of millions of years, being wiped out literally in an instant by our demand for natural resources, for space, for agriculture. And now on top of that is the problems being caused by climate change and indeed the acidification of the oceans that's also being driven forward by the release of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. Now, some people might say, well, that's the price of economic growth. But I think that this is actually quite a short-term project we're embarked upon, because nature is the source of all of our economic welfare. And the more we destroy nature, the more we imperil future generations' abilities to have decent lifestyles. Because everything we rely on, including the oxygen we're breathing in this room, is put there by nature.
And as you hint, I mean, Will Travers from the Born Free Foundation, it's a very different world from the film, from the world of the 60s when your parents were making those marvellous films, Bill Travers, Virginia McKenna. But the poaching situation in Africa, for one continent, has reached a crisis point, hasn't it? I mean, not just Africa, but we have the tigers elsewhere, but we have in Africa rhino, grey tapes, our closest, genetic relatives. Elephants, particularly. Let me talk about elephants with you, because the demand for ivory from the growing middle class in China is seemingly insatiable at the moment. And the elephant crisis just got disastrous, didn't it?
Oh, it is totally disastrous, and I think one of the disasters is that people think that there is no crisis. Because there was an international ivory trade ban in 1989, they think that the ivory crisis has gone away. But it's not. It's there, and it's as bad as it's ever been. I mean, we're estimating currently 25,000 to 30,000 elephants a year. Now, recall that in 1979, there were 1.3 million elephants. In 1989, there were 600,000. There's probably around 400,000 today. And if we're losing 25 to 30,000 elephants a year, of course, not in every part of Africa, but across great swathes of Africa, there will simply be no elephants left. And why are they being killed? For human adornment. It's not as if they're being killed because they're an intrinsic part of our human survival. Yes, they're being used for chopsticks or name seals or adornment, things to put, or for religious iconic religious purposes, particularly in the Philippines. It is a crisis, but it's a crisis that we're not paying enough attention to, as you rightly say. It's rhinos, it's tigers, it's lions, it's big cats, it's elephants, it's sharks, 100 million sharks a year, and there isn't one sustainable shark fishery in the world. We are taking out 140% of the world's ability to replenish the environmental capital. So we are running down the environmental capital that we all survive upon at a rate that is entirely unsustainable.
Give us an idea, though. Elephants, let me get back to them, because they're universally accepted now scientifically as far more intelligent than we realised in previous generations. This is now scientifically accepted. They grieve, don't they?
Yes,
Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, I mean, there's been some very long-running field research,
Yeah.
particularly in Kenya, Cynthia Moss's organisation, the Amboseli Trust for Elephants, and over 30 years of study, both into the language of elephants, into the psychology, the social makeup of elephants, and it's actually replicated whether you look at great apes with Jane Goodall or orangutans with Baruti Galdikas. The more we study, the more similar we find we are with other creatures, that we share the same emotional platform in many respects. And of course people will say that's terribly anthropomorphic. Well, I'm awfully sorry, I'm a human being, therefore I can only describe it in human terms. But I think elephants feel love, I think they feel fear and hate, I think they feel remorse, very much similar to the way that we feel it, and so do many other species, just that we don't have other words to describe it.
Yeah, Philip Foster, there was some people blame the religious view, the anthropocentric view, that this was all made for us. Let me just put an example, because I know that Tony's just back from Borneo. You saw the destruction of Sumatra, I do beg your pardon. There was a photograph recently in one of the newspapers of a forest being cleared for palm oil, for toothpaste or for shampoo or whatever. And there was a pregnant orangutan, and she was clinging for dear life at the top of that tree. Did she not have more right to that forest than the loggers?
I think possibly. I'm not going to dispute. The difficulty with figures, of course, we're told thousands of species are disappearing. Yes, we have responsibilities, and I think that's a case in point. But equally, let's put it the other way round. If we think about these figures we're quoted, scaring figures that we're quoted, I'm tempted to ask Tony, can he name me a species that's died in the last 5 years, that's gone extinct?
Gone extinct in the last 5 years? The Asian mainland subspecies of the Javan rhinoceros. I was in Vietnam 18 months ago when the last one was killed. It was poached. And if you go to Java, where the last population remains, there's about 10 left. And across Sumatra, where Nikki rightly says I was a couple of weeks ago, the forest is nearly now gone over much of the island. The last fragments are under pressure from exactly the kind of things that's just been described. Palm oil plantations, feeding global demand for vegetable oil.
But
what?
How many species are there on the planet?
About 8 million.
Or 80 million,
no,
nobody knows.
About 8 million is the most recent estimate based upon the best data that we have. We've described about 1.8 million of them, so we're having to make estimates about the remaining number. But there's something like 8 million species that share the Earth with us, and that tapestry of life forms is what sustains the biosphere, which is where we are located within. Our economy is based upon that. We are as much a part of nature as the orangutans, the birds, the flowers and the bees, and the more we unravel that tapestry of nature, the more we imperil ourselves. That's what the science is now telling us.
Here's the problem, Philip. Let's touch on the religious here. Is Reverend Philip Foster, author of While the Earth Endures?
Yes.
Is the problem that the religious view that it's all about us?
I don't think it's all about us, but
We are
God
the pinnacle.
did give us the planet.
Sorry?
God did give mankind the planet.
But we weren't here first.
No. He prepared it and gave it to us. Right. Now, that is not an excuse to go charging around the place, destroying animals. It's not an excuse for a kind of unbridled, rapacious massacre of the planet. But equally, we have responsibilities, but we also are allowed to use the planet. Now, the trouble with the sort of figures we've just had thrown at us, I remember Paul Ehrlich in the 1980s telling us that by the year 2000, 50% of the species on the planet would be gone, and by the year 2015, that's 2 years to go, it'll all be gone. Nothing like that has happened. Yes, there have been tragedies, and I accept that, but nothing like the scale that we were told.
And what's more, the tragedies when they happen are so often to do with poor government on the ground.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's a great pity. But
corruption.
Corruption, bad government, lack of control, etc. Now that's and poverty of government and inability to enforce the law and so on. Now that's a pity. But as against this feeling that kind of there's a human population explosion, we are some sort of cancer, a word periodically used by some green extreme thought, the idea that somehow man is the enemy against the planet. Well, excuse me, man is the only species that cares about the rest of the planet. And man's governance, I agree that his economies do harm, but in places and at times. But actually, providing we fix government, which is badly needed by the people of these countries as well as their gorgeous surroundings and their species, we will have sorted out a lot of the problems.
Well, Travis, and Dan, I'll come to you in a minute. I want to address Philip's point about we are the pinnacle.
Yeah, sorry.
Speak for yourself, Philip.
Well, I just think that's actually rather a patronising approach to the entire process. I mean, I work in at least 25 different African countries, and yes, there are governance issues, but there are some incredibly hard-working, dedicated people resolved with almost no resources to try and redress the balance and to hold the tide of destruction that's going on. But you have to ask yourself, where is the tide coming from? And it is actually from us. It is us.
I'm not buying rhino horn. Chinese people.
No. Us in the West. By demand, our demand, yes, absolutely.
You just said it's Chinese demand.
Our demand for global products. So Sierra Leone has just converted 250,000 hectares of rainforest into palm oil. It's and that's being driven by...
That's not being bought here either. That's being bought in places like India, China. That's where the major demand for those products
Not at all.
is.
Okay, I'll come to you. Wait, I want to hear him out. We've got plenty of time, everybody. We've got plenty of time. Carry on.
Go to your supermarket.
And the quantities are tiny.
Excuse me.
From used to food oil.
Excuse me.
Go to your supermarket and just look at the number of products that contain palm oil, and then ask yourself the question, how many of them come from a sustainable palm oil plantation? And the answer is 0.
Diana, on this point about here we are, we're the pinnacle, this was created for us. What's your view on that? And Philip's beside you, so you can speak to him about it.
I can speak directly to you.
Maybe you'll come to some kind of a conclusion.
I strongly disagree with that view. I don't think that, human beings in some sense are a certain kind of pinnacle. We are more intelligent. But if we were to value something like, how well you can pick up things with your nose, then obviously elephants would be the pinnacle of evolution, right? Yeah, exactly. So this idea that humans have dominion because we're more intelligent, I really like to go back to the Jeremy Bentham quote, and it says, is it not can they reason, or can they think, or can they speak, but can they suffer? And so even you can see how flawed human beings are insofar as this kind of species that we consider important and not important. We consider charismatic large species more important than maybe smaller species or insect species, even though they may be just as important or may be able to suffer just as much.
And also for importance for ecosystems, as Tony has pointed out.
Yes.
Ajmal, but bring you in here. There was the elephants crisis, for example, is terrible, driven by greed in Africa at the moment. And there are great, and talking about other species, great scientists like Diana Fossey with gorillas, Joyce Poole with elephants, Jane Goodall with chimps, Claudine Andre with bonobos. Chimps and bonobos very genetically close to us. And these amazing scientists have observed these species and found that they are more like us than we ever thought in the terms of self-awareness. There was a massacre in the Central African Republic recently of a large, with AK-47s, night vision glasses, Sudanese militia going through, robbing them of their ivory, hacking their faces off, leaving infants just standing there. These were elephants, for chopsticks. Does that not offend you?
Of course it does. As far as I'm concerned, God's own words in Islam is that He has created human being as the Khalifa, means custodians, caretakers of this earth. As caretakers, we don't abuse it, we don't destroy it, we don't cause the havoc. There is a verse in the Quran which says, and it is man's hand that causes havoc on this earth. So we need to, of course, take stock that we have done a miserable job. But it is also true that we don't have any other choice except to inherit this earth. We can't live on any other planet. So we better take care of it. we better take care of this very well.
Yeah.
Another statistic that we have not actually explored, leaving aside animals grotesquely killed in different parts of the world, did you know every 22nd a child dies in one part of the world because they don't have access to food or clean water? That is because of greed. That is because of disproportionate consumption of wealth. That is because of materialism that consumes our society. I think there is a huge vacuum within us. That vacuum is called vacuum of spirituality. We're filling that vacuum with material, with greed, with other material wants on a daily basis, whether it's in China, whether it's in Britain. I would like us to rethink our position. We're the caretaker, a schoolkeeper, a parent of this earth. We'll tend to it, attend to it, look after it, only take what we need and not abuse it. current abuse has become very sexy and fashionable.
So sometimes, you're kind of pitting against the interest in non-human animals and the environment against human interests. And
I'm not doing that. I'm saying they're complementary. Our responsibility is on both. Human beings need to preserve animals for them to survive. If animals disappeared, take the garden for example, the less worm that we have, the less likely
do these animals need to be guarded by rights, the same rights that human beings have?
Of course we do.
Do you want to come in here?
Yeah, so I was just going to say that the interest in non-human animals and interest in human animals are aligned in the sense that if we consume less by potentially like eating less meat, then there'll be more food available. I mean, meat is very resource intensive, it's very water intensive, and there are places in the world where forests are being clear cut so to meet the demand for meat. We are sitting here potentially vilifying people who use ivory or who kill rhinos, but each one of us, for the most part, if we're eating meat, we're killing animals on a regular basis.
More than 40.
And taking food out of other things else.
Let me bring, because there's an important point here. There is, I could come to any of you, but we've not come to you about, but Will I know is strong on this point, and Ruth, I'll bring you in a minute. But I know there is an intimate relation between people thriving and animals thriving, isn't there?
No, absolutely there is. And as I've used the word before, ecosystem services, I mean, I'll use, without going on about elephants, there are seeds that will only germinate if they pass through the gut of an elephant. The forests survive because of those elephants. The climate that those forests promote turns into water vapor. That water vapor falls on the grain baskets of both North America and the Russian steppe, which grows the wheat that feeds us. It's really as simple as that. If we start to remove, as Tony said, component parts of that jigsaw puzzle, we at the other end of the chain will suffer.
I don't think there's any dispute at all that we've got to look after eco-services. It doesn't really matter whether it's because God gave us dominion or whether because we're just rather powerful and clever people who want things to be nice. In any case, it works well for us. The difficulty is with this idea that is very common, that somehow we ought to, if we all did less, then there'd be more room for nature. There is something to be said for that. But our doing less is not actually true to our spirit.
Is greed good?
Amongst other things we are a mentally, intellectually, risk-taking, adventurous species. Whether we were God like that or we've evolved like that, one way or another, we are an adventurous species. We will take risks. We will mess things up.
But do you
no, hold on. I'll shut up when I just make this difficult point.
We're also a very aggressive species.
And we are quite aggressive. And I've had my coffee today. So, for instance, it's not likely that the Victorians could not have done fossil fuel, which produced climate change. It's not likely that we could not do nuclear power, which produces other risks. What we do is take risks, and with luck, we catch them in time and sort them out. A lot of these problems flow from our adventurousness. And that, we shouldn't imagine the cure for that is somehow to become, groovy, simple people.
Tony?
No, the way I see it, all of those human drives for ambition, for adventurousness, for risk-taking, all of those things can be harnessed to come to good outcomes on this crisis.
Sure.
Yeah.
By developing different kinds of technologies, different ways of doing lawmaking.
I was going to say that deforestation isn't a sign of our adventurousness, it's callous. In my view, if you destroy where you're sitting, you will be destroyed yourself. So what we're doing is repeatedly pressing the self-destruct button because we think that's good for us. And that's what we need to change. Changing attitude.
Matthew,
some government.
wait, Matthew, from the Taxpayers Alliance. And you've also written a book. What's your book called again?
Let Them Eat Carbon. You've
Let
got
Them
to
Eat
ask the
Carbon,
question,
right.
what kind of society does tend to protect these things the best? And now, is it that we are greedy and it's that greedy societies take the most? I don't think there's any... do we really think that there's a huge difference in the amount of greediness in different countries? Obviously not. The societies which are most successful at defending their natural environment are generally richer, are generally more democratic, are generally more capitalist, more liberal. Those are the societies which are going around setting up national parks. Those are societies which are going around putting money in protecting this. Because if people are desperate, if people are poor, then they will chop this stuff down. Because if someone's choosing between going hungry and chopping down a tree, they will. People like us can sit there and have this debate from this position, from this sort of moral disinterested position. If people are desperate, that's when when these things get destroyed. And you can see that. Look at what happened in all the socialist economies of the 20th century. They destroyed their natural environments in a way that has been seen nowhere else on Earth.
Yeah, Mark Linus.
I think you're largely wrong, but you're not completely wrong. I think the one area that definitely doesn't apply is carbon, which you said was the subject of your book. The per capita carbon emissions are highest in the most developed, richest countries, richest economies. Australia has per capita carbon emissions of 18 tonnes. The US has about 17 tonnes.
Sorry to hold sort of grab the hot air from both of you just for a second. I do want to spend a lot of time on that shortly, but we're kind of still on animals and animal rights and our equality with the animals, if we may, because I know that's a massive issue which we have to properly address.
But the question he has not answered, which is all of these are friend over there. Forgive me, I call it Matthew. Is that are we happier as a result of all of those things? The happiest people on this earth, guess what? In the happiness index published by United Nations in 2011, we are one of the bottom ones. Bhutan.
Just nonsense.
The Bhutan is the happiest nation on earth. Now, why are they happy? Because they have
their human rights aren't great. If you read the Amnesty International report,
that is right. I agree.
Yeah,
but
so maybe they're told that they're happy.
It's a very, very bad reading of the data.
Sustainable environment is a much better indicator of our happiness.
Denmark.
Sorry, say that again.
The Happy Planet Index puts Afghanistan above the UK, puts Burma above Sweden, puts Haiti and Cuba above the United States.
What were the reasons?
This is what environmentalists think. This is the way they understand the world.
I'm an environmentalist. I don't think that's garbage.
Well,
Linus defend environmentalists.
Well, no, I don't think I wouldn't put Afghanistan above Denmark in any meaningful way.
The Economics Foundation, of course, stop releasing that report.
No, well, I didn't release it, but anyway.
I want to speak to a man who has a very particular philosophy. I would now like to bring in Vinod Kapashi, the ancient philosophy of Jain. He's a Jainist theologian. Good morning.
Good morning.
How are you?
I'm fine, thank you very much.
Right.
I can quote one or two things
You
from...
literally would not harm a fly, would you?
That's correct,
That's
yes.
your philosophy.
Yeah. And that's why I would like to quote one or two good sentences from our scripture. Those who disregard or ignore the existence of life in air, water, fire, and earth disregards his own existence. And one of our other scripture says, Parasparo Graho Jivanam, all life is interdependent. We depend on earth, we depend on water, we depend on air, we depend on fire, and in turn they depend on us. So it's our duty to protect all life. We are not the master of this universe. We are not the master of this planet. We are the custodians, as you said. We are the trustee. Because we have got a brain and intelligence, it's our duty to look after all and to protect all.
The problem is, I think it's bad science, and actually I don't.
What
think,
is that?
It is bad science to argue that we are in a web of nature that you can't unpick. As a matter of fact, you can take out great wallops of species, and many habitats boogie along very well. And the idea that, say, this or that rhino is absolutely crucial. It's not. It's crucial if what you want to preserve is a huge rainforest, because it'll need a lot of territory. But actually you can unplug that rhino from its ecosystem, and the ecosystem is not in bad shape.
Really?
But I'm sorry, there's any number of perfectly good work on the healthiness of secondary rainforest.
Richard, do you really not mind if a particular species goes extinct?
No, my not minding it might or might not be a spiritual matter, but I think it is very poor ecology. It is not in my. I've read plenty of this. You have a nice line. It's a good line. I respect you for it. But it is not the exclusive line on this matter.
Let's hear from Ruth.
Okay, I disagree with what Philip said about the earth belonging to us.
And do you come from a religious perspective?
A Christian, yes.
Yeah.
I work with Operation Noah. Yes, and the earth was created by God, and it still belongs to God according to most of the Bible. So it is, and also in Genesis we read that God saw that it was good 5 times before he created us. So it's not all about us. In Job there's a load of stuff that God's speaking to Job. Where were you when I created this
I
and
would
that.
absolutely go
So
along with
it's
that in one way, yes.
yeah.
Yeah,
So
I-
it's not all about us,
At
and it
that
does
meeting,
matter.
at that meeting the other day at Clarence South, Prince Charles said something very powerful about humanity, didn't he, Will?
Yes, he said something like, our humanity is less than humanity without all the other creatures of creation. And I mean, I think that that's absolutely right.
But what we don't need is a planet of purity. As a matter of fact, I live in an island which is heavily degraded by natural terms, and much of it is extraordinarily beautiful, including my back garden, which is one of the most artificial places you could possibly imagine, by natural sense. The spiritual comfort and resource that we get from nature can be nature which has had quite a lot of human influence and still be thriving in its own terms, not completely pure, not replete in all the species it would have, and richly spiritual.
No bad thing. We haven't heard from Martin.
agreement.
Martin, I just wondered after hearing the gentleman there, the Jain gentleman there, speak so articulately about his own faith, Dr. Kapashi, do you think that we have anything to learn perhaps from moving away from monotheism to some of the Eastern philosophies?
Very strongly. I mean, I think the argument so far, and indeed the way you've worded this question, takes dominion as an assumption. And that is predominantly the view of probably about 50% of the world's population, but it immediately ignores and discards the view of another 50% of the world's population, where there is a sense, for example, the Shinto in Japan, we were at a big meeting on religious management of forestry. The religions own about 5% of the commercial forests worldwide. And we were looking at protection programs. And the Maronites of Lebanon said, why don't we set up faith-protected forests? And all the sort of Abrahamic, Jewish, Christian, Muslim groups went, yes, that's a great idea. And the Shinto and the Hindu and indeed the Jain went, what are you talking about? We don't protect the forest protects us. And that sense that you're actually part of something bigger, that you are part of nature. So much of our discussion, with all due respect, Bill, all this stuff about ecosystem deliverables, I mean, spare me. We're immediately making the planet something that we just manage rather than have a relationship with. I find ecosystem deliverables a very disturbing word. We're part of it. And as Ruth was saying, with regards to the Christian tradition, if you look at the Orthodox tradition, not the Catholic and Protestant tradition, there is a sense that we are part of something. The Orthodox talk about us being the priests of creation. We're here to be a channel of blessing. Now, an awful lot of our language assumes that we are a curse, partly because in the Abrahamic traditions, the relationship of humanity to God and then, therefore, to the rest of the planet is considered to be a curse. The Orthodox tradition and many of the other faith traditions say, yes, but we could be a blessing. And I think so much of the discourse is immediately predicated upon dominion and corruption. And we are, therefore, following that path. But there are other traditions that actually offer us a very, very different way of relating.
Well, you were looking confused there.
Well, no, I mean, I just think there is a spiritual, I'm not a religious person, but, and Richard says it very well, that a spiritual dimension to our relationship with nature. What I would argue is that we have, while on the one hand we crave it, and you ask anybody in the street, they get inspired by nature. A wonderful photograph of a natural scene or wildlife inspires and speaks to them in a way that words can't. But at the same time, we like to compartmentalize that and say, well, I'll have my little spiritual relationship with nature, but I will also drive hell for leather for environmental
by
destruction.
Talking about nature as ecosystem deliverables. I mean, if you go back to...
No, I'm not. I'm talking about as part of that.
Well, I don't know. You've just again set us separate. I think the challenge from the
because
religious
we'd like
side
to be
is,
separate.
Yes, and that's probably the deepest flaw in our thinking.
Is it?
I would argue so, because if you separate yourself from something, then it becomes an object. It becomes something that you have a relationship with, if you so wish. It's something that you manage and run.
And if you say we're
we're
separate, Ajmal, if you say we're separate because we are more intelligent, that's dangerous as well, because some primates are more intelligent than some people. And so if you... No, it's a fact. If you talk it on... It is a fact, isn't it? If you take it on pure intellectual tests, I mean, it's an inconvenient truth for some people. But it is. So if you take it on a basis of intelligence, you have a problem there.
Well, I want to say that we shouldn't separate ourselves from the environment, and however there is a distinct fact on the table that human interference is causing a havoc on this universe. Our relationship is at the moment ruptured. It's a broken relationship. How do we repair it? And I'm more interested in making sure what we as human beings, what we call fitra, the natural disposition of human being in Islam, and that is you're part and parcel of the nature. When you break it, you'll never be happy. All the prophets of God from all the scriptures went to nature to find God. Muhammad spent a long time, Jesus spent a long time, Moses spent 40 days in the mountains.
I'll take your word for it.
There's nothing.
But hold on, let me just finish. So my point is, we are part and parcel of this nature. What we have to do is mend the relationship that we're broken. And that is we're no longer custodians, we've become abusers, consumers, and greedy individuals. That needs to change.
Diana, sorry.
What's natural about eating, halal slaughtered animals that have their throats slit? What's natural about living in houses or having having leather shoes? There's nothing natural about all of that. This is a complete naturalistic fallacy. This idea about having a relationship with nature and us having a relationship, this interdependence seems incredibly abstract to me. It's about suffering. It's about how much suffering do we cause and how do we reduce the amount of suffering that we're causing in the world.
I didn't connect the wearing leather shoes.
I know, but what I'm saying is that you're saying that we have to be a natural part of the world. How are you on a day-to-day basis going to reduce the amount of suffering you're causing and be a part of nature?
What you have just said earlier on, eat less meat, be more conscious of the waste that you have. In this country alone, 40 million or billion pounds of food waste happens from each and every one of us. Now, that is not acceptable.
Simon, hello.
Yes, it's...
You're a cat lover, aren't you?
Yes, I feel in a rather difficult position, having said that I don't think religion should be allowed to interfere in the way society organises itself.
You have said that on a previous occasion. Yes.
But we have heard insights from other religions. I was very impressed by the expressions from the Jain religion. And I think we have to accept that Christianity has had a very bad record, I think, off the top of my head, of the way the Spanish settlers destroyed the civilizations in South America, just as one example. And there are much more.
There are many.
And all I can say is, at least today, we have got a pope who has chosen the name Francis. And those of us who know anything about St. Francis of Assisi should be encouraged about that. And perhaps this pope will not utter a single word about the sacred subject of sex, which has dominated Christian
But also,
thought.
Simon, of course, in his opening address, if that's the right term, he did mention care for the environment, didn't he?
He did. And there is, as has already been indicated, a clear tradition in Christianity that humankind, perhaps the pinnacle of evolution, perhaps not, has a huge responsibility. The term dominion is, I think, anachronistic. We dare not think in those terms now. We have to think in terms of responsibility. There is also a tradition in Judaism from which Christianity came and which is still closely linked to and influenced by, of the sacredness of all creation. And I am very much influenced by a 6th century teacher, that's of the Common Era, St. Benedict. And in fact, I am what's called an oblate of St. Benedict, that is, I am associated with the Benedictine monastery, because we believe that this 6th century writer had some marvellous ideas about how society should organise itself. He was very focused on community, being self-sufficient, being reverent to all things, avoiding waste, avoiding conspicuous consumption, and that sort of thing. But the point I want to make, if I'm able to make a point, is that we're living in a world which is not the 6th century. We now have a huge amount of information, which we never had before, a much huger population. We can do so much more that St. Benedict wouldn't even have thought about.
Should we return to the simple life?
We can't.
No, we can't.
We are so responsible now because of what
the horse has bolted. There was a lady back there with her hand up as well. Do you did you hold that thought?
Just wanted to say that to stop the suffering, we can't have this debate without thinking about the overpopulation and the growth of the population, and that I was wondering how religions would help the environment by helping us maybe have less children. I don't know if religion can play a role in that.
Yeah, and over here, that's good morning. Hello.
Hello. I have been interested to hear talk about the economy come up a few times, but I think that the way the economic system works is actually a bit of a morality-free zone, also a spiritually free zone, although economic theory itself works as a kind of orthodoxy of its own. And I would like to encourage both the theologians and the environmentalists to get more involved in critiquing how the economy works, because I think the acceptance of an idea like ecosystem services makes me nervous that they aren't really understanding how this economistic thinking is actually colonising the environmental movement, and we need to be very careful about that.
And also we have, Fiona Harvey from The Guardian, we have so many problems that are hitting us right at the same time, don't we?
Absolutely. If we just had one of these problems, then we could probably deal with it quite easily. If it was just a question that we're wiping out species, then there are ways that we could stop that. If it was just a question of we were overfishing, we could stop that. If it was just a question that we're polluting our air and our water, we even in this country we find ways to stop that. The problem is that we've got all these problems hitting us at once, and not only are they all hitting us at once, but they're hitting us at a time when our species is incredibly successful. And we've got 7 billion people on this planet today, and in less than 30 years we're likely to have at least 10 billion, probably that's an underestimate, probably about sort of 12 billion. And we've got to think about feeding all of those people, ensuring that they have decent lives, not lives lived in horrific slums like billions of people today, but having access to the kinds of decent standards of living that we expect. And we are coming up against planetary limits.
But look at the rise of China and the power of China. I mean, the seas are cleaned out now around Mozambique, for example. Because of the Chinese desire for those fish, and but can we deny them that? They want what we have.
I wouldn't want to deny anyone a decent standard of living.
Sorry?
I wouldn't want to deny anyone a decent standard of living. And it is possible for all of those people to have a decent standard of living on this planet, all at the same time, but only if we organise things very, very differently from the way in which we organise things today.
Mark Linus. Hello again. Hi again. Author of The God, Species and 6 Degrees. A lot of animals are on the brink because of climate change, we're told. A lot of people are as well. We face big changes. We are facing big changes. Masses of people are going to inhabit our Earth and already do. We have massive challenges. How bad could things get?
Well, it's important to, if we can put Genesis and Dominion aside for a minute, to understand that scientists are now talking about this problem in a whole new way. And are discussing it as a new geological era with this idea, the name that's been coined is the Anthropocene. So it's a geological era named after our own species. And it's important to understand that our species has never experienced the kinds of things that we're going into. We've never experienced the kinds of temperatures we're going into. We've never experienced this kind of, the level of ocean acidity that we're going into. We are the single greatest agent of natural selection now, because we get to decide what species survive on this planet with us. And that does give us an enormous stewardship responsibility, and it gives us the responsibility, I think, to bring about a planet where everyone does have the right, and I mean all 9 billion people have the right to live at the kinds of levels of affluence that we in the West enjoy. And there has to be a way, and I think there is a way to do that without destroying the natural ecosystems on which we depend.
Is it possible, though, that all of us would have the same access to the resources and the wealth that we have in the West today? I'm just wondering, is it sustainable in the way we're going? Because
our big elephant in the room.
Our presumption is all these resources are infinitely available.
Metaphorically.
Tony's just said there's a big elephant in the room. My reaction is, thank God there's one left.
Well, it's the one about global equality and the extent to which we can have great riches coexisting with great poverty. We've got to solve that as part of the solution to the environmental problems. We can't have multi-billionaires living alongside people living on less than $1 per day. And if we're going to fix this, the aspiration that everyone can be multi-millionaires, we have to do away with that mythology.
So what do you say to the developing world who say, well, we have the right to be as successful and as comfortable and as wealthy as you are. We want resources.
This is a matter for debate for all countries, to be debating the kind of future that they think is plausible and desirable for them. And I think this is then about the kinds of conversations that are happening amongst scientists, amongst non-governmental groups, between political parties, about how we're going to be able to square this seemingly impossible equation. It's not impossible.
It's not impossible.
It's not impossible. It can be done, but it's going to require a level of debate and sophistication of the argument that we've not yet seen. And so simply saying that everyone's got a right to consume like Westerners, it takes us nowhere.
We'll try this in a minute.
Well, just I totally agree with what Tony said, and I just also think it's about choice. And I'll give you one choice. We can build the electrified East Coast rail line, or whatever it is, the high-speed rail link to Birmingham. We can spend £33 billion on that and reduce journey times by, about 20 minutes. Or we can do something with that kind of money that would be a dynamic game changer in terms of putting in place the kind of qualities of life that we decry by looking at the pictures in our newspapers, but actually do very little about.
Well, we've got to. I think what's really wrong about this whole discussion, from this question about population through to how do we ration ourselves, is absolutely not. Right? There are so many environmentalists who applaud the one-child policy with all of its barbarity, because they're looking at this thinking, well, at least there's fewer people, we can fit this on the planet easier. It's entirely the wrong way to understand this. We can either get through this problem of climate change by limiting ourselves, by saying fewer people, less consumption.
Do you acknowledge it is a problem?
Absolutely. Right. Lower living standards, or by transforming the problem, by the ingenuity which has got us through crises in the past. And that's why, frankly, I would much rather have 100 million more Chinese people, and maybe one of them figures out nuclear fusion and gives us an alternative to fossil fuels that's actually economical, than not have those 100 million Chinese people and assume we can keep on with the limits approach.
Fiona.
Right, we've had this question of the one-child policy. Now, I don't think anyone here is actually advocating something like that. Well, okay.
Well,
you're a good friend of Jonathan.
Jonathan's not here.
Listen,
you're getting us to support things we don't support. Your entire argument rests on a tissue of fabrication.
I'm very sad.
So listen,
We've established we do not accept that, right?
Okay, there are, according to surveys that have been done, there are hundreds of millions of women around the world who don't have access to contraception and to control of their own fertility and would like to. Now, the question of population, the question of how many people can live on the planet, certainly we can have 10 billion, we can have 12 billion and so on, if we do it in the right way. But the question is, the way that population comes down is if women have control over their own reproductive rights. And I have to say, one of the things about organised religions down the centuries and today is that they've been very, very bad at allowing women to have rights over their own bodies.
They may want to have half as many children, but it's so that they can give them 3 times the standard of living. This population control will not deal with the emissions problem. It's like you're saying, oh, well, if people lag their lofts, it'll mean we have less carbon dioxide emissions. I thought people want to lag their loft so they can save the money and go spend it on an Audi, right?
Well, if you ask women in developing countries...
You just are making a problem. We can't limit humanity to deal with this problem. We need to rely on what humans are good at. Their creativity, their ingenuity.
If you ask the women themselves in developing countries, most of them will say that they want families that are smaller. They do not want more. The most that they want is a family of 5 children, and that's kind of upper limit.
They're not thinking about climate change.
Want families that are smaller. That's what women want.
There's also
listen to women.
There's also, I mean, I'm not a demographer, but there's a very strong correlation between reductions in infant mortality, so fewer children dying before the age of 5 from diseases which can be solved, and fertility. So actually, if you look at the global average fertility, it's now down at about 2.5, 2.4. So we're almost getting back down to natural replacement. So the reason why the population is going to continue growing up to 9 point something billion is because people are surviving longer. Young children in developing countries are surviving longer. And I don't think any of us, environmentalists included, would say we want more kids to die. So we are going to have to sustainably run a population of 9 billion on a planet with finite resources.
Richard? I think the problem that we will face is that whether or not kind of debate sorts this out, or whether economics sorts it out, and not much debate. I mean by that the poor world will get richer because it's capitalist and knows which way is up, and it's getting there. Now, whether or not the resources can be found for that will actually come out in the wash to some extent. The NGOs will campaign, there will be campaigns, the middle class will start campaigning about the smog in their streets. The pressures will apply for all kinds of environmental improvement as the old, what we used to call the third world, improves. There is a weird question that haunts people like me, which is that, is there a point at which the rich of the rich world will have to really impose limits on themselves, as it were, by law, on their resource consumption? So far we've kind of got away with not, and we can't say we're very proud of the results. We're thinking of taxing fossil fuels, etc. Maybe by the time we get round to thinking, God, we've really got to deal with fossil fuels, it'll be a no-brainer just to do solar because we'll know how to do it so well. It's not a done deal at all that future generations, my children, my children's children, their children, will need to do big government to sort this, or whether, as it were, our current muddle, which is lots of economic success, a good deal of technical ingenuity, some mess-ups, and please, not too much socialism. We'll kind of do we just don't know yet.
So we've talked about a lot about economic policy and about things that like dominion, but really there needs to be some consciousness raising amongst all of us. All of us
our energy needs as well. We need to discuss
our energy
that,
needs as well, but all of us can make a tremendous amount of difference if culturally we start valuing things like being effectively altruistic, giving money to the developing world, helping women get access to contraception. Each of us can make a difference by giving some percentage of our income away, by eating less meat, by changing our daily decisions. It's not about bureaucrats necessarily. It's about a whole society raising their consciousness about their own choices.
That's important, but having run a major environmental organisation for many, many years, I can tell you that there's only a minority of people who think like that. This is going to require institutional level change at the level of government, at the level of economics, crucially, by putting the right kind of prices into markets to reflect the environmental damage being done. And all of that needs to be supported by cultural change, but I dispute the extent to which we're going to solve this by voluntarily people changing their behaviour, eating less meat or giving money to the third world. It's going to require a far bigger level, and actually the organised religions to be part of this too, in spreading a culture that's much more eco-friendly.
I know what about renewables, wind farms. Are you a fan?
Absolutely no.
I didn't think you were.
Squandering hundreds of billions of pounds, which could be used to do something useful on inefficient sources of energy. With an absolute, I mean, we have this debate about how much should we prioritise cutting emissions. Britain building lots of offshore wind farms will do nothing to help the major emitters who really count, the Indias, the Chinas, cut their emissions. All it will do is show them that this is a way of
China are building lots of wind farms too.
The Chinese are building coal power plants at a ferocious rate. The reality is these are economies run on fossil fuels. The only way we can help is by making low carbon energy cheap rather than using it when it's expensive.
Your old friend Fiona wants back in.
Yes, making low carbon energy cheap is a good idea, and renewables is a way to do that. At the moment, because at the moment we have fossil fuel reserves, around the world that are cheap and easy to get at. They are coal, they are oil, they are gas. We can get at them. We have the technology. We can blast apart rocks in this technology known as fracking that will release gas and release oil, and we can do that now. We weren't able to do that for years, but now we can do that, and we're doing it all around the world, particularly in the United States. If we continue to do that, if we take out all the fossil fuels to which we have access, and if we burn them, then we will get, and Mark will be able to tell you, we will get not just a world in which we get a bit of global warming, maybe 2 degrees or something like that. We will get a world in which we have about 6 degrees of global warming, and that is the world at the moment is less than 6 degrees warmer than it was in the last ice age. So if that's the kind of change that you're prepared to undertake, then dig it up, and burn it.
What kind of world do we think is most like? So you're having a debate. How do you leave that stuff in the ground? What kind of world is more likely to leave that in the ground?
Because you tell people they have to.
Yeah, give it a second. No, okay, look, you tell people you have to. What, are you an imperialist now? We're going to go conquer these countries, tell them they've got to leave it in the ground.
China is spending more money. China is spending more money now.
Martin.
China is spending more money now than the United States, and has done so for the last 8 years.
Because they're selling it to us.
No.
We're paying for it.
On alternative energy.
They're investing in selling it to us.
And if you go and look at every house I've worked in China...
But their brown energy is outpacing their green energy.
Yes, at the moment that happens in most economies when they're making the switch. You don't change overnight. And it's a myth, and I think I'm slightly concerned by the degree to which China and India are being sort of held up as these bogey people who we have to basically constrain in some way or another. First of all, wait a minute. First of all, many of them actually have profound value systems. And what we're talking about fundamentally is value systems. I mean, economics or even the environmental movement, Tony, is simply a manifestation of a fundamental value. Most of our discussion is not at the values level. It is at the implementation level without an examination of the values underneath. What I see happening in China, and to some degree also in India, is actually a re-exploration of some of their traditional values in order to understand what on earth is happening. You take the Taoist approach, for example, towards climate change and towards the burning of fossil fuels. They understand that in the notion of yin and yang. Yin is the earth, yang is the heaven. By burning what is in the earth and putting it into the heaven, you are unbalancing the universe. Now, through that philosophy, through that value system,
It's common
there is
sense
a
philosophy,
huge
isn't it? Yeah.
change going on. And the problem is we come at it and talk about it in terms of economic incentives. What about the philosophical incentives?
Well, I wonder, Doctor, what you think about what you're hearing.
Well, I can mention one thing. There is enough for everyone's need.
Is there?
There isn't enough for everyone's greed. So, and we are so irresponsible, like Fiona said, if we can take this oil and coal out all the time, we'll disturb the system. And some scientists say that earthquakes and tsunamis happening because we are taking everything out from the earth all the time.
But what we may well do is disturb the system within an inch of its life. We may well disturb the system so that there's only 1 billion people who can get a living and rather few elephants, etc., and the whole thing starts again from that hammered plateau. The point is, for me, is it is a problem. World socialism trying to sort it out might be an even bigger problem. And what I mean by that is, what I mean by that,
Let's put that on the record.
What I mean, yeah, well, I've just said it. What I mean is that if our adventure turns out to produce quite a big wobble, that wobble will last a few hundred, 1,000 or 2 years.
The point is that
for my money, it remains an extraordinary adventure. The human one does, spiritually,
yes,
and
why isn't it
and intellectually.
Okay.
You can't do it. Yeah. Subtracting risk. In other words, what you cannot do is what you shouldn't do is we should somehow really eliminate human risk.
We can just see this thing coming down the line at us like a train. Now, it is sensible to get out of the way, okay? And so we know that we've crossed this threshold of 400 parts per million of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. We know that if we continue driving this upwards to the extent that we are, look like we are going to continue doing, we are definitely going to heat the planet. We've got satellites all around that can tell us an energy imbalance. The planet is absorbing more energy than it's giving out. So
what will happen to us? What's the worst case scenario?
The worst case scenario is that we would see a big population reduction. We'd see the kind of planetary heating which hasn't been seen for 50, 60 million years, and it will wipe out a lot of people.
Famine,
absolutely,
pestilence.
But that doesn't have to happen. That is avoidable. This is an avoidable scenario at this point, and that's what's important to understand.
I think the implications of what Richard said. If there's 1 billion people left as a result of these kinds of changes, that means 8 billion people are going to go. That is an unimaginable catastrophe that we're talking about. And I think that then helps us focus on the idea that we're having a false argument about people versus the environment. It's about protecting the environment in order to ensure a decent future for all human beings. That's what this is about.
Reverend Philip Foster, well, let me ask you first, before you speak. Do you believe ultimately in her way, God will protect us, God will sort it out?
No, I didn't, not quite that. God has given us this planet. That was my first point. I'd come back actually something
Will
Ruth
God
said.
look after us?
Well, if we trust him, yes. But if we don't, we'll have the natural consequences of our mistakes. That's the way it works. If you drive nature into a corner, it will bite back. And it does.
It's not your belief the world is going to end at some time anyway.
Well, it is, yes.
So this
my
may
belief, yes.
Is this it?
Are you trying to accelerate?
I doubt it.
You can't.
I doubt it.
Yeah. You can't do what?
But I think I want to come back to...
Time for it to come to an end, you can't accelerate it. What you will have is a miserable living in it, and that's what we're trying to avoid. We're trying to create an environment where we can all live happily and more sustainably, and I don't think they are mutually exclusive. It's just that we're not taking responsibility for it. We want to have our cake and eat it.
Diana.
What's more likely? Is we're all going to converge on solutions that are going to, are we going to convince people in the developing world that they shouldn't engage in fracking or that they shouldn't pull up coal? Or what is probably more likely, and I agree with people here on my left, is that we're going to develop technological innovation that's going to solve these problems. But there's also some models that say that if we stop producing greenhouse gases tomorrow, it'd be 1,000 years before it would actually cool the planet down. So we have to develop solutions for the mess that we've already gotten ourselves into.
Okay, well, and we got some audience people up, hands. Good morning, hello.
Hi. Ooh, yeah.
Don't worry about that, it's a microphone.
So one of the things I've noticed is that a lot of the, we're looking at all of these things as very isolated events, but everything's I'm not an expert, but from the little reading that I've done, everything's very integrated with economic system, growth in population, and with the environment. And I think if we look at some of the root causes of everything, at the moment, like, we have to just see, for example, where's the most money going into, and that is war. Most of the money in the world is actually going through a profit of making war. And then there's also all these corporate organizations who are taking so much resources because they don't have a proper value system. So I think if we try to look at the root causes, which is to change, educate people and change institutions to change their morality, then anyone who goes into these businesses can work together and actually make a solution.
Okay, thank you. And you say you wanted to say, it's a blue shirt.
I feel that I work for the Church of England and spend my time trying to convince church congregations about the environment. One of the big issues is not that people are unaware of what's happening, it's where they make it a priority. We don't seem to be able to get into a debate where people will see in their daily lives that this is actually a priority. We have very little time left, as many people have said already.
Ruth, what do you think?
Yes, I'd agree with that. We just need to see this as the biggest issue facing us today. And
so many issues within the issue, though, aren't there?
Yes, but if people out there understood how big this problem was, anyone with children would be thinking, instead of what Richard seems to be living on a different planet, sort of looking down and saying, right, we're going to have this problem, instead of thinking, right, what can I do about it? And if everybody out there thought, what can I do about it, and started supporting environmental groups, started writing to their MP and say, actually, that the natural balance of the planet is more important than my bank balance.
And also, there was let's go back to where we started slightly. Our fellow species, our fellow animals. Your parents, Bill Travers and Virginia McKenna, they made marvellous films, and that film, Born Free, from which your organisation is, after which it is named, about Ailsa the lioness. It's incredible. I just read the other day, there are probably about 15,000 lions left in Africa. It's one of those statistics that just hits you between you expect the beautiful, amazing animal. Okay, just to be devil's advocate, if we lose them, why does it matter?
Well, that's an interesting question, but actually I think that it's not so much a practical answer, it's more of a sort of philosophical answer, and that is that if we are unable to find enough room in the world for wild species such as lions, tigers, elephants, rhinos, great apes, etc., then nothing else is safe. Nothing else is safe. Because we are prepared to let those species go, there will be no other lines to draw in the sand. In other words, it will eventually and quite quickly become all about us. It's already almost all about us, but it will become all about us, to the exclusion of absolutely everything that does not provide some kind of service to us alone.
And the really interesting problem here is that we've had 40 years at least of school teachers telling children how much the environment matters, and the children soak it up and say they're terrifically green, and they've grown up to be very bullying to their parents about a nonsense bit of recycling, and then they jump in jet planes as fast as they can get into them and go off for long holidays and trips abroad. In airplanes, these things that notionally they've had 40 years, a couple of school generations of indoctrination, which they say they've totally internalized and absorbed. Why I think things may unfold pretty much as they're going to unfold is that, so far as I can see, you can pump all this good stuff and attitude change into kids, and they will absorb it, and they will love it, and they will still jump in the airplanes.
You don't have to.
Martin,
well, they do.
Are we going to make it as a species? Is our place
guaranteed?
Is our ticket booked for a while yet?
Well, I think
you've got a minute.
Theologically, I think there is a real conundrum. If evolution, and I believe in evolution, is how God has worked out the way the planet will evolve, I don't see that we're particularly more special than the trilobites that were successful for about 140 million years, died out about 120 million years ago. I think one of our problems is we take ourselves a wee bit too seriously. And frankly, I'm with Bill. If we haven't that's right, Will. So sorry, Will. Going back to your dad. If we haven't got space for the rest of it, then probably we're going to be dropped from the plot.
Well, listen, thank you all very much indeed for taking part. Thank you. Thank you for your contributions. The debate continues on Twitter and online. Next week we're in Warrington, but for now, goodbye from everyone here in Bristol. Have a great Sunday afternoon, and may your God go with you.
The lobbying scandal and the state of the coalition, the Sunday politics on the way next.